How do you spark real lasting change across broken systems? Sandra Waddock has spent decades answering that question, and her book, Catalyzing Transformation, delivers a roadmap for rethinking how change actually happens. I'm Robert Plank. It's the Marketer of the Day podcast. We remove the tech barriers so you can focus on real conversations. That website is dfypodcast.com. But the focus for now is on Miss Sandra and her amazing book, Catalyzing Transformation, which is all about three key processes. There's connecting, hearing, and amplifying. So that way we can get that whole system transformation and we can break out of the tedium, the monotony of a rigid, slow-moving organization and nudge it toward change without burning out or getting fired. Seems like a tall order. Sandra will help us. So Sandra, glad to be speaking with you.
Nice to see you, Robert.
Nice to see you as well. And it's great to have you. And so what are you all about? I know that you're an academic, you have multiple books, you have a lot to say. So what's your focus and passion?
So right now my focus and passion is on whole system transformation, which is what the book really addresses, although I believe the process is also applicable at organizational levels and at community levels. And I'm really interested in creating a world where humans live in harmony with the rest of nature. So
wouldn't that be great?
Wouldn't that be great? Yeah. Sort of not happening yet,
but we can get there with your help.
Yeah, partly that's, I think, because although there's a lot of research and work on system change and on transformation, there aren't a lot of process-oriented approaches to it that are flexible enough to really allow people to bring their own thing to it, which is, I think, what needs to happen.
Okay, well, we need some of your help understanding about the problem and what the solution is. And so this whole idea of system change, what does that look like? Do you have a good example?
Well, yeah, I mean, I've just come off of an IPBES, the Intergovernmental Panel on Biodiversity and UN organization, assessment on transformative system change, on transformative change. And one of the issues that the world is facing is the potential for, well, obviously we know about climate change. People are less familiar with the collapsing biodiversity in the world. But we rely on things like the bee population for pollination and other pollinators. And if the insect population collapses, humanity is likely to also collapse. There's the potential for other ecosystem collapses. And we can see just looking at what's going on in the United States, the potential for social disruption if growing inequality continues. And we've seen growing inequality for many years now. And so you have social and ecological issues that are facing humanity in what some people characterize as a polycrisis, meaning many crises coming together, interacting with each other, and, you push over here and something happens over there. So, but you can't necessarily predict that because that's sort of the nature of what's going on. So when I think about systems, I'm thinking about a community could be a system, a company could be viewed as a system, a whole nation could be viewed as a system. So a bioregion could be viewed as a system. So there's any number of levels that we can think of systems at. And there's information about what the characteristics of these systems are. There's lots of information about what kind of skills people need in order to be working with these systems and similar things. But not so many folks have put together a whole process that looks at how you might consider bringing people together in new ways for them to co-create a way of changing a given system.
Okay.
Yeah.
And now you've come up with this solution. And I mean, you're so right that the world it seems so scary. And at any given day, I'm not even sure what to think of it, right? I'm not sure if there's just too much information and you wonder like what will kill us first, right? Will it be, and like the whole thing about like the collapsing bee population, you hear about that too, right? They say like from 20 years, 90% of the bees went extinct. And it's like, oh my gosh, like, do we have years to go? What's next? What's happening? But then you also hear like the good stories, right? Like there was something about how like the GMOs led to like less over farming. Well, but then you hear the other extreme, like in the Amazon, there's like some carbon burp or bubble that is in danger of like not working and ruining the whole planet. And then you hear about like drones can plant like 1 million trees. So it's like the swings, the back and forth. And so what should we be focusing on? Is there hope? Is the world going to end? Is it a mix? What's even happening? It's so crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. I don't think I could have written this book without some degree of hope. So, my hope with the book was that I don't think it's the solution. I'm not sure there is a solution, but it's an approach that allows people to bring their own set of ideas and solutions to these very complex problems. So, if that all of the things you're describing are systemic problems, and they're taking place in systems that are complex, that are, that one of the other terms that's often used is wicked problems, which means all of these things are interrelated, they're dynamic, constantly changing, they're interdependent with each other, they're all connected, and they're unpredictable, and that's the nature of systemic change. And so this process that I have put together came out of an initiative that I was working with during the pandemic that was founded by a friend of mine named Steve Waddell. And Steve brought together a group of people from basically around the world to think about how we could bring about system change. And so we worked on various things over the years, and it ended up coming out for me in this book, and probably a series of articles that I'm still writing on this whole process of bringing about change. So one thing to recognize is there isn't a solution. There isn't a particular outcome. There are going to be a lot of people with different perspectives and different points of view and different ways of operating and potential for conflict, who are coming together in new ways. Because it all starts with what I've noted as an under-organized system. So if you're thinking about the system level, the first thing is, okay, let's define our system. Let's say it's the food system that we're interested in. That would be one possibility, and all the problems associated with that. Now, we know that the food system has tentacles that reach out into all kinds of other systems. How we get our food, how we transport our food, how we grow our food, all of these things, and who's doing that work. But we have to put some sort of boundary around any kind of system. And so conceptually, we'd say, okay, let's deal with the food system as an example. That system is comprised of many different types of actors. There are farmers, there are stores, there are the trucking companies that I mentioned, or the other shipment methods, on and on. You could just name all kinds of stakeholders to that system, all kinds of actors that are relevant to that system. And they're typically not organized in any way that makes sense to them. And there's no, we like to think of organizations as having, and they tend to have authority structures. So if you work in an organization, you have a boss, a CEO, if it's a company, and that person and the top management team can tell you what to do, in theory. Maybe
Right.
not always, but in theory. So at least there's some sort of organizing structure to it. But these systems tend not to have that organizing structure. There's no boss. There is no one person who can bring these people together and really claim any authority to tell them what to do. And so you have to approach it in a different way. And you have to, so the people who would try to bring them together are what I call transformation catalysts. They recognize they don't have that authority. However, they might have the network, and they might be able to understand the system well enough to figure out who needs to be in this conversation that we're going to create, or the dialogue or the process that we're going to get engaged in. And so what they say an initial step would be to identify those folks and the different interests that they represent, to try to get as many of the different parts of the system together in conversation as possible. You probably want to start with the ones that have the biggest networks, so that their actions will affect the most groups. But you bring them together, And that's part of what I call the connecting process. So connecting involves trying to figure out what this system is, defining the system, setting boundaries around it, figuring out who's in the system, figuring out what the system dynamics are, what's going on in the system, where the issues in the system are. And that's a process of seeing the system. And then also part of that process, making sense out of it. So bringing these folks together and saying, oh, look, folks, here's what we're coming together to try to do. Let's, we got problems in our system, food is not being grown in the food industry, for instance, in particularly healthful ways. When we have mass monocultures, one crop being planted for miles and miles, you risk all kinds of problems. If a blight hits you, you're going to have a problem with that crop. So, there's lots of potential issues with these things. So let's get together and think about what the problems are. And what you want is for these people to come together, not with you telling them what the problem is, but them sharing their information, them sharing their knowledge, them sharing their ideas about what needs to happen so that they can collectively come together and co-create some ideas about what needs to happen. And that begins to engage the process that I call cohering. So cohering involves this collective visioning, if you will. What is it our aspirations are? What do we want to do together? How do we figure out what is possible in this particular realm that we're working in, this particular world that we're working with? So we do there's lots of methods for collective visioning. Many times in transformation efforts, people use something called 3 horizons, which has the benefit of putting the future aspirations. What is it we want to achieve together on one side of the thing? What's the problem with the current system on the left side, usually on the left side, with a declining? The system is not doing so well. It's failing maybe, so you've got this line coming down and all the things that are there. And then in the middle, you put sort of an inverted U shape kind of way of conceiving it. And that tells you what's holding the system now, what's holding that system in place. There are other techniques you can use. Otto Scharmer Sharp and colleagues invented the 3 horizons framework. Otto Scharmer has theory U. David Cooperrider uses appreciative inquiry, and there's others called future search and World Cafe. Any of these approaches, and probably numerous others, could be used for visioning. So it's not a formula. There isn't one thing that you do. It's, okay, who's got the skills to use what approaches? Let's do some collective visioning. Let's get our ideas out there. And then we figure out, okay, given what we see as being needed in order to get us to a better place, what can we do together? So then you enter a process of some sort of action planning. And now you've got, because it's an under-organized system, you've got some organizations that can do certain things and are doing certain things. So the farmers in the food system would be growing the crops and considering how they want to grow their crops into the future. The stores that purchase agricultural goods would be another actor, and they don't control each other. They influence each other, but they don't control each other. So some of the things that some actors will do, they'll do on their own. And other times they'll collaborate. They might say, oh, we want to your marketing effort here, we want to market products that are grown in a different way, maybe grown organically, as opposed, or grown without tilling, for instance, as processes that might be better for the natural environment. And okay, if we the farmers do it this way, will the stores purchase these things and market them? So then you've got some collective actions that are taking place that are shared, that you're doing together, but then the farmers go off and do their growing just as they always would, but maybe they change the way they're doing it, and the stores do their marketing just as they might have always done. But maybe they've changed the orientation of that marketing in order to align with this new set of activities. And that would be the cohering process as I see it. And then in the amplification process, they start implementing these plans, often experimentally. Let's try a pilot here. Let's do this over there. Let's see what works. And then once you find things that work, you can start to, I don't like to say scale them because every context is unique. Every situation is unique. So I like to talk about propagation. If you drop seeds, they're going to grow in their own way, depending on the conditions. Well, let's propagate what works. And if it doesn't, let's do something different. If it doesn't work, let's do something different. And then are there other, so this is what you're doing here is creating a transformation system, a group of folks that are committed to action, that are enabling each other to achieve the kinds of results that they're looking for and begin process of system transformation, which you've got to understand is going to take time, right? Because it's not going to happen overnight. I mean,
Of course.
some transitions happen very quickly, usually in the form of collapsing systems. So we don't want that to happen. We want the system to have some resilience and to be able to sustain itself. So so you've got this transformation system, and you might have the need at different levels of the system, maybe within the let's say the markets or the farmers unions or farmers associations, to have additional catalytic action being taken place, more transformation catalysts. So you can get the spreading impact of these ways of doing things. And I will say a lot of this comes out of thinking, and it takes certain sets of skills to do these kinds of things. So you see smaller scale efforts. You don't see any wholesale efforts yet using this kind of approach.
Okay. Well, this is a fascinating subject. There's a lot to think about, and people have thought this through, right? You say there's different approaches, and there's with the three horizons. It sounds like that's looking at the future and what's failing about the present and what's keeping the present going. And you have this connecting, cohering, and amplifying. And it's a lot to think about. And it's great that if someone wants to change one of these systems, that change is possible. And that term organization, right, or organized or organizer, it gets thrown around so much. And something that blew my mind maybe a year ago was this idea that I think I looked up the root word, and it said it's like the organs of your body, right? You have your heart and your lungs, and they're separate, but they also interrelate. But there's kind of that duality of it. And like an organ, like a musical instrument, right? It has all these different aspects of it. And so if something's under-organized, it's such a mess, no one's making sense of it. But if you can figure out, well, what needs to change, what's the goal, who am I getting involved, having these conversations, and not being a bully, not being a boss, but just getting the information, having the meetings, and making it all work, that sounds like a great upward path to make a difference, to prevent failure. And where are some ways that this can go wrong? Because I can imagine if someone does not have the people skills or does not apply the focus or the patience, then this can just be so frustrating, right? So underwhelming and such a disaster. So can you think is there like one or two things we need to maybe keep in mind to make sure that the change we want to happen actually does happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've identified some of the potential problems in any of these kinds of things. This is a generative or dialogical process, conversational process. It's not, and the outcome can't be predicted. And so you have to be willing to sort of sit in the uncertainty of that if you're one of these transformation catalysts, and if you're participating in this process as well. There's always, of course, the potential for conflicts that are difficult to resolve. And so that's why the shared aspirations, developing those shared aspirations early on is really important, because having a goal that you all agree to some extent is really important for getting past those kinds of hurdles and conflicts. And of course, if people come into it, I always talk about taking your ego hat off. You can't enter these things thinking, I'm going to become the boss. I'm going to tell people what to do. I have the answer. Because as this sort of generic process that I'm outlining. There are no answers in it. There is processes in it, and it's a process of engagement and, in a sense, from a complexity theory perspective, emergence. You can't predict what's going to happen. It comes out of the interactions. So if you and I have this conversation, like we're having this conversation, it whatever comes of it is because you're asking certain questions and I'm answering those questions. But we couldn't have predicted in advance exactly what was going to come out of this conversation. And that's true of these kinds of interactions. They are emergent in the moment, and we have to be able to see the opportunities and take advantage of them. And we also have to be able to identify what the systems theorist Donnell Meadows called leverage points. Where are the points in this system where if we make a small change here, we might be able to amplify those results in big ways? And so, those things take systems understanding as well. So,
yeah. Well, it's a lot to navigate, and it seems like there's a lot of the letting go of it, right? Of embracing more of the process instead of the outcome, letting go of your ego and seeing where it goes and the unpredictability of it all. And so if someone says, I love Sandra's ideas here and I want to find out more, how does someone know if they're a good fit for this book, Catalyzing Transformation?
Well, if you're interested in making change to make the world better, I think you're a good fit. I think these are processes people can learn. There are certain skills involved, and many people use various forms of mindfulness practices to help them sort of open up to the potential for what I call allowing, when you just said letting go, allowing the process to emerge. If you're going to be a transformation catalyst, then there are certain design principles that you'll probably want to look at, which are many of the things we've been talking about already. And you got to try it. You just got to get out and do it. I think you can't, there's a lot of change efforts, positive change efforts taking place in the world these days. I think this type of approach can be very helpful in providing a framework for people to hang their own efforts on. And again, I don't have an ego in exactly this or that being done. It's just, let's think about these three important processes and make sure that all of them are present in some form or other.
Right. Apply some brain power and take some action. Don't just think about your goal to change the world. Think about that mission, get the data, get the feedback, and adapt and adjust and go through this process. We talked about connecting, which means seeing, understanding, and making sense of the system. Cohering, which means co-creatively developing shared goals and action plans. And amplifying, which means implementing, evaluating, and elaborating effective transformative action. And Sandra Waddock from Catalyzing Transformation, Making System Change Happen is this book. Whether you are a catalyst, social changer, you're a responsible business, activist, policymaker, or a student of change, then Catalyzing Transformation can help with this innovative organizing process that you can use to catalyze purposeful whole system transformational change for a better world. That's Sandra Waddock, Waddock. The book is Catalyzing Transformation, Making System Change Happen. And before I let you go, Sandra, it's the scary part of the show where I try to stump you. I try to put you on the spot by asking about a fun quote or lesson that has served you. So what comes to mind for a quote or lesson?
Well, I'll go back to where I started with my friend Steve Waddell, who started the Bounce Beyond initiative, where a lot of these ideas were germinated, and entering into collaboration with people. I'm an academic. We like working independently, pretty much. That's partly why we do what we do, and I have had to learn through that and through the IPPES assessment that I was just part of to be much more collaborative and myself. So I've had to put myself through some of the kinds of activities that I now write about in this book. So not so easy sometimes.
I can relate. I want to be just by myself getting things done. Oh, people slow me down, but you can only get so far if it's just you. So it's an important lesson to work on those social skills, people skills, leadership skills, and get other people on board without being too aggressive, but also making sure we get done. It's a lot of nuance there, but with your book we can answer that core question, how to make purposeful transformation happen. And that book to help us is, once again, Catalyzing Transformation. So thanks for being here, Sandra, and educating us and telling us that change is possible as long as we know that there's a label for it, which is catalyzing transformation. Other people have approaches. We don't have to go it alone, and we can take action, save the world, make a difference. So I appreciate you being here and helping us out.
Thanks for inviting me.